From Studio 19, I'm Jeff Allen Wolf. This is A World Gone Mad. All right, let's jump right in. Here we go. The war with Iran is over. The war with Iran is not over. Trump is once again trying to sell the American people a victory before anybody can verify that a victory actually exists. According to administration officials, negotiations with Iran are moving toward a major agreement. One U.S. official reportedly claimed Iran's agreed to significant concessions involving its nuclear program and support for proxy groups throughout the Middle East. That's the story being pushed. The problem is that Iran immediately pushed back and said that's not what happened. Iranian officials say major differences remain. They say negotiations are continuing. They say no final agreement exists. Pakistan says a deal is close. Who the hell knows anymore with Donald Trump? He's always trying to manipulate a news story to his benefit. So let's stop right there. If the White House says one thing and Iran says another, somebody's story has a problem. This isn't complicated. Either Iran agreed to these terms or it didn't. Either a deal's close or it isn't. Either both sides are describing the same negotiations or they're not. And right now they're clearly not. What amazes me is how often we're expected to accept these announcements without asking the most basic questions. Where's the agreement? Where are the details? Where's the evidence that Iran actually accepted what administration officials are claiming? Instead, we're getting another round of trust us, no thanks. We've seen this movie before. We've seen the grand announcements. We've seen the declarations of victory. We've seen the oversized promises. We've seen the administration rush to the microphone to tell everyone how amazing everything is before the facts have had time to put their shoes on. Then reality shows up. Then the details emerge. Then the story gets revised. Then we're told we misunderstood what was said in the first place. It's exhausting. And the reason this matters is because we're not talking about a new post office or a ribbon-cutting ceremony somewhere. We're talking about Iran. We're talking about nuclear negotiations. We're talking about one of the most dangerous and unstable regions in the world. A misunderstanding here isn't embarrassing. A misunderstanding here can have consequences. That's why credibility matters. When administration develops a reputation, for exaggeration, people stop taking its claims at face value. That's not bias. That's cause and effect. If somebody repeatedly tells you they caught a 10-foot fish, and every photograph shows a 3-foot fish, eventually you're going to ask for proof before believing the next story. That's where we are with Trump. The administration wants credit now. The administration wants headlines now. The administration wants applause now. The actual agreement apparently can come later. Sorry, that's not how serious foreign policy works, Donald. You don't get credit for a deal that hasn't been completed. You don't get credit for concessions the other side said it never made. You don't get credit for declaring victory while the negotiations are still happening. The truth is simple. Maybe a deal eventually gets done. Maybe it doesn't. But if Iran and the United States are publicly describing two completely different realities, then somebody's selling a version of events that doesn't match the facts. And given this administration's track record, Americans would be foolish not to ask hard questions before buying what they're selling. A federal judge has rejected a last-minute effort to keep Donald Trump's name on the Kennedy Center. U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper denied the administration's request to pause a previous ruling while the appeal process continues. The court noted that the Kennedy Center had already begun complying with the ruling by removing Trump's name from some of its branding ahead of the court-ordered deadline. Now let's talk about how completely ridiculous this entire situation is. The Kennedy Center exists to honor the arts, music, theater, dance, culture. It isn't supposed to be a monument to whichever politician happens to be occupying the White House at the moment. Yet somehow we've reached the point where we're having court battles over whether Donald Trump's name should remain attached to one of the nation's most recognizable cultural institutions. Think about that. Most presidents leave office, spend their time writing books, building libraries, giving speeches, or enjoying retirement. This president, Donald Trump, apparently wants his name attached to everything short of the moon while still in office. It's never enough. A building isn't enough. A golf course isn't enough. A hotel isn't enough. A social media platform isn't enough. Trump treats public recognition the way a starving person treats food. No amount's ever sufficient. There always has to be more. And that's what makes this story so revealing. This isn't really about the Kennedy Center. It's about ego. It's about legacy. It's about a man, Trump, who desperately wants history to see him as larger than life, and who seems unable to separate public institutions from his own personal brand. The Kennedy Center wasn't created to celebrate Donald Trump. It wasn't created to celebrate Joe Biden. It wasn't created to celebrate Barack Obama, George Bush, Bill Clinton, or Ronald Reagan. It was created to honor JFK. It exists to celebrate artistic achievement and cultural contributions to American life. Yet somehow we're supposed to believe that removing Trump's name is some terrible injustice to Donald. Please, if your legacy depends on having your name glued to a building, then maybe the problem isn't the building. Maybe the problem is your legacy. What I find amazing is how often this administration turns everything into a personal grievance. A court ruling becomes a personal attack. A criticism becomes a personal attack. A joke becomes a personal attack. A name coming off a sign becomes a national emergency requiring lawyers, appeals, and public outrage. What's remarkable is that we're even having this conversation. The Kennedy Center is supposed to celebrate artists, performers, composers, and cultural achievement. Period. Yet somehow the story became whether Donald Trump's name is big enough, visible enough, and permanent enough. That isn't a debate about art. That isn't a debate about culture. That's a debate about ego. The truly revealing part is that somebody looked at the Kennedy Center, one of the nation's premier cultural institutions, and thought, you know what this needs? More Trump. That's not public service. That's personal branding with a government address. The judge made his ruling. Trump's name is coming down. Life will continue. The Kennedy Center will still host performances. Musicians will still perform. Actors will still act. Audiences will still attend. The only thing that's changing is that Donald Trump's name won't be occupying quite as much space in the spotlight. And judging from the reaction, that may be the part that's hardest for Donald Trump to accept. And finally, imagine you're looking at a map of the Atlantic Ocean. Almost the entire ocean is getting warmer. Year after year, temperatures climb. Scientists expect to see reds, oranges, deep patches of heat spreading across the water. Then they notice something strange. Right in the middle of all that warming is a blob of ocean doing the exact opposite. Not warmer, colder. Consistently colder. For years, scientists have been trying to figure out why it's there. It shouldn't be there. It doesn't fit what the scientists expected to see. Year after year, satellite images keep showing the same thing: a giant blob of unusually cold water sitting in the North Atlantic while much of the surrounding ocean continues to warm. It's large enough to be seen from space. It's been studied for years. Researchers have debated what might be causing it. Some thought it was temporary. Others suspected it was connected to much larger changes happening beneath the ocean surface. Now, a new study may finally be giving scientists some answers. Researchers call it the Atlantic Cold Blob. What makes this so fascinating is that scientists now believe this isn't just some weird ocean quirk. According to the new research, the blob may be a warning sign that one of Earth's most important ocean circulation systems is weakening. Think of this like a giant conveyor belt in the Atlantic. Warm water moves north from the tropics. Cooler water eventually sinks and flows back south. That circulation helps regulate temperatures, weather patterns, rainfall, and sea levels across huge portions of the planet. For years, scientists have debated whether the cold blob was connected to changes in that system, and this new study suggests it probably is. The researchers argue that as Greenland continues losing ice, massive amounts of fresh water are pouring into the North Atlantic. Fresh water is lighter than salt water, which makes it harder for water to sink and complete the circulation cycle. The result may be a slowdown in the ocean currents that help move heat around the planet. Now, before anybody starts planning for the apocalypse, this doesn't mean the currents, suddenly shuts off tomorrow. It doesn't mean Europe freezes next year. It doesn't mean the world's ending next Tuesday. What it does mean is that scientists are becoming increasingly concerned that changes are already underway, and they may be affecting the Atlantic in ways we could actually measure. That's what makes the blob so interesting. It's visible. You could literally see it on maps, and like I said before, from space. While much of the ocean is warming, this one region stands out like a giant fingerprint left behind at a crime scene. Researchers have been staring at it for years, trying to figure out what it's telling us. And according to this latest study, it may be telling us that something much bigger is happening beneath the surface. The truth is, scientists still have questions. They don't agree on every detail. They don't know exactly how quickly these changes might unfold. But the evidence connecting the cold blob, the changes in the Atlantic circulation, continues to grow. Which means this isn't really a story about a blob. It's a story about how the planet leaves clues. Sometimes those clues are hidden thousands of feet below the ocean surface. Sometimes they're buried in ice cores. Sometimes they're found in tree rings. And sometimes they're sitting in plain sight on a map of the Atlantic Ocean, looking like a giant cold blob that shouldn't be there. That's today's insight into a world gone mad. If you've enjoyed the podcast, found it informative, maybe got a laugh or two, then please contribute to keep this podcast around. I'm not backed by corporate media, everyone. There's no outside money funding this podcast other than my own wallet. So if you could please contribute to the GoFundMe below, even a small donation makes a difference. The link is in the description of this episode. I'm Jeff Allen Wolf. This is A World Gone Mad. I'll be back Friday. Until I come back, I urge you, the wolf pack. Remain skeptical. Question everything. Please don't lose hope. And most of all, stay alert.